You know, when you hear the name Confucius, you might picture some dusty old scrolls or, I don't know, a fortune cookie. But what if I told you that his ideas on leadership are actually a razor-sharp, super practical guide for anyone in power right now? We're about to unpack a 2,500-year-old system for good government that, honestly, feels more relevant today than ever.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the most important person, the leader themselves. Then we'll talk about the power of language. After that, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of policy, figure out how you even know if you're succeeding, and finally, we'll look at the two kinds of leaders Confucius says you'll always find.
So first things first. For Confucius, any kind of effective leadership, any legitimate power, it doesn't start with laws or armies. It starts in one place and one place only, with you, the leader.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. This idea completely flips our modern view of leadership on its head. It's not about barking orders or enforcing rules. It's about being the thing you want to see in others. Real authority isn't something you can just take. It's something you earn through your own personal integrity.
This right here is the fundamental question Confucius asks every single person who wants to lead. Your ability to bring order to a country, a company, or even just a team is a direct reflection of your ability to bring order to your own life. It is the ultimate form of leading by example.
And this isn't just some vague philosophical idea. Confucius lays out a pretty concrete checklist for how a leader should act. You've got to be the hardest worker in the room, stay diligent, be respectful in your duties, and have this kind of simple, unshakable strength. These aren't just, nice-to-haves. For Confucius, they are the absolute bedrock of any legitimate power.
Okay, so you've got your own house in order. Where do you go from there? Well, if your character is the foundation, then your words, the language you use, are the frame that builds the entire structure of the state.
So this brings us to a huge concept in Confucian thought, the rectification of names. Now, it sounds kind of academic, I know, but it's incredibly down to earth. All it means is that things have to be called what they actually are. A public servant who doesn't serve the public? A peace treaty that leads to war? For Confucius, these gaps between our words and reality are the first cracks in the foundation of society.
So what's the big deal if language gets a little fuzzy? If we use a bit of spin or call things by names that sound better than what they are? Well, Confucius would say, that's not a small problem. That's the first domino to fall in the total collapse of social order.
And you can see the whole chain reaction right here. It starts when words lose their meaning. Then, conversations become pointless. When talk is irrational, of course your plans are going to fail. From there, your culture starts to decay, justice becomes random, and pretty soon people are left totally confused and lost with no idea how to act. And it all started just by being careless with words.
Okay, so a leader's got to have personal integrity and use clear, honest language. Got it. But what should they actually do? What does the day-to-day look like? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of Confucian policy.
This quote is basically the North Star for all good government. It's a really simple but powerful test. Is your state run so well that your own citizens are happy and content? And does it become a magnet for people from all over who want to come and be a part of it? That is the ultimate goal.
So how do you get there? Well, Confucius has a checklist for this too. First, put the most talented people in charge, no matter where they come from. Be merciful when you can. Play the long game. Don't get distracted by quick, petty wins that might hurt you later. And above all, focus your energy on building a society that runs on fairness, trust, and a shared sense of what's right.
All right, so you're doing all this stuff. How do you know if it's actually working? Confucius had a really clear, three-step way to measure the success of a state. And believe me, the order is absolutely crucial.
Take a look at this progression. It's so logical. First, a leader's main job is just to provide security and stability so the population can actually grow. That's sign number one that you're doing okay. Then, once you have people, you focus on their economic well-being, you make them rich. And only after they're safe and prosperous can you move to the highest level, educating and training them.
And that final step, the training, it is so important. Confucius figured it takes about 7 years of good government and education to get citizens properly ready. Why so long? Because sending an untrained, uneducated people off to war isn't just a bad strategy. He literally says it's the same as throwing them away.
I mean, when you look at this whole system, from your own personal conduct to state policy, you'd have to ask what kind of person could actually pull all this off? Who is this ideal leader?
And that question, well, it brings us right to the absolute heart of his philosophy. Confucius basically saw the world of leadership as this constant battle between two types of people: the ideal leader, who he called the gentleman, and the flawed one, the small man. Now, it's really important to know, when Confucius says gentleman or junzi, he is not talking about being rich or coming from a noble family. Not at all. He's talking about a nobility of character. The gentleman is someone who, through constant work on themselves, becomes the kind of person who can actually put all these principles into practice.
And the way he draws the line between these two is just brilliant. Look at this. The gentleman can find common ground with others. They can harmonize, but they always stay true to their own core principles. The small man, on the other hand, is a conformist. They just echo whatever seems popular, without any real belief behind it. This one really gets to their inner state of being. Think about how they carry themselves. The gentleman has this quiet, easy confidence that comes from actually having moral substance. But the small man, because they lack that substance, is deeply insecure. And they cover up that insecurity with this loud, fragile arrogance.
This is such a fantastic insight, especially if you've ever had a boss. You might think the principled leader, the gentleman, would be hard to work for. But Confucius says no, they're actually fair and predictable. You always know what they stand for. It's the small man leader, the one who's easily swayed by flattery, who's a total nightmare to work for, because you never know what will set them off. So ultimately, it really boils down to this. The gentleman is a person with deep integrity. They hold themselves to a really high standard, not because someone is watching, but because they have a sense of duty and, frankly, a healthy sense of shame that keeps them from doing the wrong thing. They're reliable, they're honorable, and they are worthy of trust.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. You know, we live in a world that so often rewards the loudest voice in the room and the quickest, easiest win. Confucius offers us a totally different path, a leadership based on substance over style, on long-term wisdom over short-term gains. Maybe this 2,500-year-old idea isn't old-fashioned at all. Maybe it's exactly what we've been missing.